We're about ready to begin, so thank you for joining us this evening. I'm Susan Anslow Williams, and I am the priest, or rector is the official title. That means the priest who is in charge of this congregation, and it is my pleasure to welcome all of you. Many of you were here last week, some of you were not. It's been fascinating to hear the different stories from our speakers last week, and we have another set of speakers today. We will be having, well, our third speaker spoke to us last week also, but it is my pleasure to begin our consideration of the holy writings of our faith traditions by introducing to you Todd Mendel. He is the past president of the Jewish Community Relations Council, who sent him to us when there was no one available from our closest Jewish congregation. He will tell you a little bit more about himself shortly, but it is a pleasure to welcome him here as we begin our consideration in the chronological order of the faith tradition speaking tonight. You have the oldest tradition here tonight in this discussion. Welcome, Todd.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So just a real brief little backgrounder for me. I was talking to Phil. I grew up in Cleveland. I went to an Orthodox Jewish day school, which is, you know, the very serious Jewish education until I went to college. And here in the Jewish community, my wife's from here, so we moved here eventually. And I'm very involved in the Jewish community here. Belong to several synagogues and do a lot of advocacy and other types of things on behalf of the Detroit metropolitan Jewish community. Been to Israel many times, etc. So that's a little bit about the background. Today we're here to talk about writings. What are the books that we use? What are the writings that we use in Judaism? So there are essentially three basic areas to start with. Hebrew is the beginning language, but I'll use English, but occasionally I'll throw in some Hebrew terms and I'll tell you what they mean. So the first one, you probably all heard of, the 5 books of Moses. That is the Torah, same thing. It's also called the Chumash. It's written in Hebrew. I have a version here. You can see it later. This side's Hebrew, this side's English. And it's the 5 books of Moses. You would know them as Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And it's the story from creation up until Moses dies just before going into the land of Israel, and Joshua takes them in. So that's where the Torah ends. The next set of books picks up. It's called prophets. So the prophets range. You would know the first one is Joshua. There are about a dozen. Ezekiel, Jeremiah, etc. And that is sort of a history of what goes on in the next phase of Jewish history and the story of the Bible. The last area is called writings, and these are things you might know as Psalms, Proverbs, the book of Ruth, the book of Esther. We just had a Jewish holiday where we read the book of Esther still, and it is actually amazing how right on that book still is even today. It involved events in Persia a couple thousand years ago, and we are still dealing with that. So those are the 3 base books. They're often called the Tanakh. So this is a more of an English version than this one. And the reason it's called Tanakh is because in Hebrew, the first letter of each of those 3 things spells Tanakh. What is it? So the other thing, each of these books, sets of books, and you can't see it from where you are, but like the top half is the actual text, and the bottom half and other parts of the pages in the back are filled with commentaries. So these books were written, thousands of years ago, and in the last 1,000 years or so, different rabbis have made commentaries on every single part of every single one of these books, And so you could spend literally your lifetime studying the books and the commentaries. And there are a few that are really well known. The names won't mean anything to you, but there are a lot of them, and the last of the sort of great commentators on all these books was about in the year 1100 or 1000. There was a set, give or take 100 years. So those are the main books and main writings, and every single week in the synagogue, certainly in the more religious ones, you read a chapter of the Torah, the first 5 books of Moses, and there's a corresponding prophet section, and it's designed so that this is close to you every week. You know, you're reading some portion of it, and some people take it, a lot further and study it all the time, but the design is that you're reading it and it's close to you every week. All right, so that's one set. There's also something called the Talmud and the Mishnah. You might have heard about it. So what this is the Jews are living. The Bible ends. The stories of the Bible ends, and the Jews are living on a day-to-day basis, and they have all sorts of questions. How do I observe this? At some points they're in the land of Israel. At some point they're exiled. There's certain things you're supposed to be able to do only in this area, not in this area. So the rabbis were constantly being approached with questions of, what do we do? How do we observe this commandment or that commandment? And so over many hundreds of years, they came up with a set of rules for day-to-day living, emanating from the 5 books of Moses and these other things, but it became a whole new set of books called the Talmud and the Mishnah. And the Mishnah are like the rules, like the 3 lines of rules, and the Talmud is about the 20 pages of how they got to the 3 lines of rules. And people study these things today. It's very lawyer-like. I'm a lawyer when I'm not here doing this, but it's very comparable to lawyer stuff. Where you have a statute that Congress might pass, and then judges, etc., explaining in cases and law like that. But this is divinely inspired. So you have this set of books. It's elaborate. It covers virtually every topic: birth, death, marriage, divorce, eating, holidays, everything. And it was developed for day-to-day life. That stopped being written approximately the year 500. After that came another, even more refined set of rule books that rabbis developed because life kept continuing, even though they stopped writing the Mishnah and the Talmud. There were, living in Eastern Europe in the year 1500 wasn't like living in, North Africa in the year 500. So the rabbis came up with more rules. There's a book called the Kitzer Shulchan Aruch, which is an even, more closely rule book type of thing. And people still follow these and consult these today. I mean, the more religious parts of our religion, the people who are Orthodox, they are essentially following what's in these books. Some minor modifications for today, but the more religious you are, the less there is a modification. Then we have those books. For Passover, which you guys have probably heard about, there's another separate book. It's called the Haggadah. It essentially tells the story of Passover. So we were in Egypt. How did we get there? We were enslaved there. We got out. God took us out, brought us into the desert, gave us the Torah, took us to the land of Israel. And it takes you through the story. And on Passover, we have a Seder, 2 nights of Seders. And you're supposed to pass down this story from generation to generation. And I can tell you we're still doing it today. And that book has really not changed very much at all and since it was written. And I think you can find old Haggadahs, 1,500 or so years old at this point. All right, then you have something else called a Siddur, which is a prayer book. So everything I just mentioned is not the prayer books. So the Siddur is a set of prayers, and it was developed by rabbis, again, thousands of years ago. It has been modified over the years. The more religious aspect parts of our religion keep adding it more, so it's getting longer, and the less religious and the less observant are shortening it, and it's getting real short over there. So depend what your brand is, but the prayer book is, and it's the system of prayer is pretty similar. The same basic prayers are in the book, are in each of the books, and there are some of it is chapters and verses from the Torah, but a lot of it is just, praising God, thanking God, asking for help, trying to be a better person, a whole host of prayers for essentially day-to-day living. The service is pretty much similar, as I mentioned. The more religious people in the religion pray 3 times a day, and you have to have 10 people, and if you're, again, the more religious aspect, it has to be 10 men. The less observant, it can be mixture of 10 men and women. I can tell you at our synagogue down the street, there's constant pressure to be one of the 10 people, because it's not so easy 3 times a day to get 10 people to show up every single day, and there's no days off. So, and then there's a set of prayers. That set of prayers in the morning, it takes about an hour. In the afternoon, it takes about 15 minutes. In the evening, it takes about 10 minutes. And the same base prayers are in each of those, although the morning one is a lot bigger. And then on Friday night to Saturday night, we have the Sabbath. Prayer book changes a little bit. They add prayers for those occasions. For any Jewish holiday, there are different additional prayers still built around the same base set of prayers. So there's Passover. There's a holiday called Sukkot where you build it looks like a little hut. Maybe you've seen it. There's a holiday for the celebration of getting the Torah called Shavuos. There are tons of holidays that are fast days. There's a holiday every month for the new moon. There's a holiday for the new year, the Day of Atonement, etc., etc., etc. Lots of praying, lots of holidays. There are prayers in the Siddur in this book for, if you're sick, if you got back from a dangerous trip, if you, literally anything under the sun is there. And then, as I mentioned before, part of the morning prayers on Monday, Thursday, Saturday, and then also Saturday night. In each of the morning ones and then Saturday night, there's a portion of the service is devoted to going through a chapter of the Torah. So the idea is that literally if you are observant, every few days you are you're going through this again, at least some portion of it, and it's close to you, and the lessons of it are, close. And the idea being you'll study it and try to live a good life and live by it, etc. I got a lot more I could tell you. I'll just go with a few other little tidbits, and then I guess I'll sit down and turn it over to the next person. The Torah is written in Hebrew, so each Torah is handwritten. In order for it to be good, a person has to write it by hand. And there's, surprise, surprise, a lot of laws about how to write it, how each letter has to be done, how each page has to correspond, etc. And the Hebrew is written without vowels. And in Hebrew, the vowels are they look like dots and dashes. And you'll see that in Arabic too. And they help with pronunciation. And the Torah has none of those. It's just without the vowels. If you look at Hebrew in Israel, they do it without the vowels. And you're expected to sort of pick that up, and there are a few places to make sure you say it right. Hebrew, by the way, is a language that, while it's biblical and these books are all written in Hebrew, it didn't disappear from the scene. It was just out of the sunlight for a long time, but it has bounced back as a modern, living, active language today, used in Israel, but used in other places. And with a little anecdote, I on a trip to Tunisia a couple years ago. There's a Jewish community there, a very small one. And the languages that they spoke were Arabic and French and Hebrew, and the languages we spoke were English and Hebrew. And so the only common language we had to talk was Hebrew. And if you told me that I would be standing in Tunisia one day on an island talking to other Jews in Hebrew, it would blow your mind. I wouldn't have believed it. So anyway, that's sort of the background. I'm sure there'll be questions later or whatever. And thank you.